The invitation felt like a lead weight in my shaking hands. Years of relentless work, late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee, and sacrifices that clawed at my soul had culminated in this moment, an award recognizing my contributions to the field of bioregenerative medicine. They were all going to be there, witnessing my victory, but the crimson was still wet under my fingernails, the metallic tang clinging to the back of my throat, and the laughter echoing in my memory. Their laughter, as if my success was a joke. They thought they had silenced me, relegated me to the shadows. They were wrong. This award wasn't just recognition, it was the first stage of my plan. If you truly love your sister, subscribe now. My name is Scarlett, and until recently, my life revolved around two things: my research and my family. The former was my passion, a relentless pursuit of scientific breakthroughs that could alleviate suffering and extend life. The latter was my anchor, the unwavering support system that had sustained me through countless setbacks and moments of doubt. My sister, Vivian in particular, had always been my confidant, my closest ally. We shared everything: childhood dreams, adolescent anxieties, and the triumphs and tribulations of adulthood. Or so I thought. When the invitation arrived, a beautifully embossed card announcing the prestigious Pioneer Award, I immediately called Vivian, my voice bubbling with excitement. I envisioned us celebrating together, just like we always did. Her initial reaction, however, was underwhelming. A curt, "That's nice, Scarlett," followed by a litany of excuses about conflicting schedules and prior commitments. She and her husband Mark were simply too busy, she claimed. "We don't have time for stupid awards," she sneered, the words like shards of glass against my skin. Her words wounded me deeply. It wasn't just the dismissal of my achievement, but the blatant disregard for my feelings. I tried to brush it off, attributing her behavior to stress or a momentary lapse in judgment. But as the days passed, her indifference only intensified. She avoided my calls, dodged my attempts to meet, and offered only perfunctory congratulations via text message. The sting of her rejection was compounded by Mark's equally callous attitude. He had always been charming, but I now saw a glint of something colder in his eyes, a subtle condescension that had previously escaped my notice. He'd pat my shoulder, offer a saccharine, "Good for you, Scarlett," and then launch into a self-aggrandizing monologue about his own business ventures. The award ceremony loomed, and the prospect of celebrating alone filled me with a gnawing sense of emptiness. I had always imagined sharing this moment with Vivian, basking in the glow of her pride. Now her absence felt like a gaping hole in my heart. I told myself it didn't matter, that their support wasn't essential to my success.
But deep down, I yearned for their validation, for the affirmation that my hard work had not gone unnoticed, unappreciated. I decided to confide in my parents, hoping they could offer some comfort or insight into Vivian's behavior. But their response was equally disheartening. They seemed more concerned with maintaining family harmony than acknowledging my hurt feelings. "Vivian's just going through a tough time," my mother said, her voice laced with a familiar note of appeasement. "Don't take it personally." My father chimed in with a platitude about sibling rivalry and the importance of forgiveness. I felt invisible, my emotions minimized and dismissed. The day of the ceremony arrived, a whirlwind of nervous energy and forced smiles. As I stood on the stage, accepting the award, I scanned the audience, searching for a familiar face. My parents were there, dutifully applauding, but their expressions seemed strained, their eyes filled with a mixture of pride and discomfort. Vivian and Mark were nowhere to be seen. The weight of their absence settled upon me, heavy and suffocating. Later that evening, after the ceremony, I received a text message from Vivian. "Congratulations," it read, followed by a string of generic emojis. No explanation, no apology, no hint of genuine emotion, just a perfunctory acknowledgement, as if she were checking off an obligation. The message felt like a final, definitive rejection. I stared at my phone, my vision blurring with tears. Years of shared memories, of unwavering loyalty and unconditional love, seemed to dissolve into nothingness. The pain was acute, a sharp, searing agony that cut through my heart. I realized with a chilling clarity that something had irrevocably changed between us. The bond that had once defined our relationship was now fractured, perhaps beyond repair. It felt like a part of me had been cut away, leaving a raw, gaping wound. I tried to understand her behavior, to find a rational explanation for her sudden coldness. Was it jealousy? Resentment?
or something else entirely? The more I pondered, the more confused I became. I decided to confront her, to demand an explanation. But as I dialed her number, a wave of weariness washed over me. What was the point? Even if she offered an apology, the damage had already been done. The trust was broken, the innocence lost. With a sigh, I hung up the phone. I knew deep down that our relationship would never be the same. The person I trusted most was one of them.
The following weeks were a blur of forced smiles and strained conversations. I tried to bridge the gap between Vivian and me, initiating phone calls and suggesting lunch dates, but my efforts were met with a wall of polite indifference. She would agree to my invitations with feigned enthusiasm, only to cancel at the last minute with flimsy excuses. Her eyes darted away whenever I looked at her, as if she was hiding something, as if my very presence was a source of discomfort. Mark, too, seemed to be actively avoiding me, his once effusive greetings replaced with curt nods and hurried departures. It was as though I had become a pariah, an unwelcome presence in their meticulously constructed world. Sleepless nights became the norm. I would lie awake for hours, replaying our last conversations in my head, searching for clues, for any indication of what had gone wrong. The silence in my apartment was deafening, amplifying the gnawing sense of isolation that had taken root in my soul. My work, once a source of solace and inspiration, now felt like a burden. The weight of my unanswered questions pressed down on me, stifling my creativity and sapping my motivation. I found myself making careless mistakes in the lab, jeopardizing experiments and incurring the wrath of my colleagues. My focus had shattered, and I could no longer summon the concentration required to perform my duties effectively. My boss, Dr. Evans, a stern but fair woman, noticed my decline and summoned me to her office. Her brow furrowed with concern as she listened to my halting explanation. "Scarlett," she said, her voice softening, "you're one of the most brilliant minds I've ever had the privilege of working with, but lately you haven't been yourself. You seem distracted, preoccupied." I stammered a response, trying to downplay the extent of my distress, but she wasn't fooled. "Whatever it is that's troubling you," she continued, "you need to address it. Your work is suffering, and so are you. Take some time off, clear your head. Come back when you're ready to focus." Her words were a lifeline, a much-needed validation of my struggles. I thanked her, my voice thick with emotion, and promised to heed her advice. I took a leave of absence from the lab and retreated to my family's cabin in the mountains, hoping that the solitude and natural beauty would help me heal. But even surrounded by the tranquility of the wilderness, I couldn't escape the torment of my thoughts. Memories of Vivian and me flooded my mind, each one a painful reminder of what I had lost. I wandered through the forest, aimlessly searching for answers, for some glimmer of understanding, but the only response I received was the rustling of leaves and the mournful cry of the wind. One evening, while rummaging through some old photo albums, I stumbled upon a picture of Vivian, Mark, and another woman, a woman I had never seen before. They were standing together, arm in arm, their faces flushed with laughter. The woman bore a striking resemblance to Vivian, but there was something different about her, a subtle air of sophistication and confidence. I stared at the picture, my heart pounding in my chest. A seed of suspicion began to sprout in my mind, a dark, unsettling feeling that I couldn't ignore. Who was this woman, and why had Vivian never mentioned her? I turned the photo over, searching for a clue, and discovered a handwritten inscription on the back. "To Vivian and Mark, with love and gratitude, Isabella." The name was unfamiliar, but it resonated with a strange sense of foreboding. I felt a growing unease, a premonition that this woman held the key to Vivian's changed behavior. I decided to investigate, to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. My sister broke me, and I stayed silent as my plan began to form. The photograph became an obsession. I researched Isabella, a name as common as rain, yet each search turned up a dead end. No social media presence, no professional affiliations, nothing. It was as if she didn't exist. My paranoia bloomed into a suffocating dread. I started noticing patterns, subtle shifts in Vivian's behavior that I had previously dismissed as stress or fatigue.
Late-night phone calls whispered from the other room, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when I entered, and a newfound protectiveness of her phone, guarding it as if it contained state secrets. I decided to confront her again, armed with the photograph and a desperate plea for honesty. This time, I wouldn't back down. I drove to her house, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. The air crackled with anticipation, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. I found her in the garden, tending to her roses, her movements graceful and serene. Mark was nowhere to be seen. "Vivian," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk." She turned to face me, her expression guarded, her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. I held out the photograph. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She stared at the picture, her face paling, her lips tightening into a thin line. "It's nobody," she said, her voice dismissive. "Just an old friend." "An old friend you never mentioned?" I challenged, my voice rising. "An old friend you've been hiding from me?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around nervously. "It's complicated, Scarlett," she said, her voice pleading. "Please, just drop it." But I couldn't drop it, not anymore. The need to know, to understand, had become an all-consuming obsession. "Tell me the truth, Vivian," I demanded, my voice firm. "Who is she, and what's going on?" Her composure crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her body began to tremble. "It's Isabella," she confessed, her voice barely audible. She's my twin sister." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. A twin sister? How could I not know? How could she hide something like that from me for so long? The betrayal cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. My vision blurred, and the glass in my hand shattered. The revelation of Vivian's twin sister, Isabella, was just the beginning. The floodgates were open, and a torrent of secrets poured forth, each one more shocking and devastating than the last. Isabella, it turned out, was the favored daughter, the golden child who could do no wrong. While I toiled away in the lab, dedicating my life to science, Isabella had been living a life of luxury, funded by my parents' generosity and her husband, Mark's, illicit dealings. Yes, that Mark. The charming, successful businessman was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a con artist who had built his empire on lies and deception. And Vivian? She was complicit, trapped in a web of deceit and manipulation, her loyalty divided between her sister and her conscience. The Pioneer Award, my crowning achievement, had been a direct threat to their carefully constructed facade. My success threatened to expose their secrets, to unravel their carefully woven lies. They had tried to undermine me, to sabotage my efforts, hoping to silence me before I could become a liability. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I retreated into myself, consumed by anger, grief, and a profound sense of betrayal. The cabin in the mountains became my prison, the solitude amplifying my despair. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring. I was a shell of my former self, a broken woman haunted by the ghosts of her past. The darkness threatened to consume me, to drag me down into the abyss. I even considered ending it all. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a spark of resolve that refused to be extinguished. They had tried to break me, to silence me, to erase me from their lives. But they had underestimated my strength, my resilience. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, my forgiveness for complacency. But they were wrong, so very wrong. I would not let them win. I would not let them destroy me. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever before, but not with blind rage. I would use their weapon against them, deception. I smiled. I acted broken, but I was recording everything. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every interaction, every subtle gesture that betrayed their guilt. I meticulously gathered evidence, piecing together the puzzle of their lies and deception. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was fueled by a burning desire for justice, for retribution. My grief morphed into cold, calculated rage. The pain didn't disappear, but it became a tool. I wouldn't waste energy crying. I channeled it. They thought they were untouchable. They believed they were above the law, immune to the consequences of their actions. But they were wrong. I would expose them, reveal their true nature to the world.
I would dismantle their empire,
brick by painful brick. My biggest advantage? They believed I was still broken. They thought I was defeated, wallowing in self-pity. They underestimated my intelligence, my resourcefulness. They had created a monster, a force to be reckoned with, and that monster was about to be unleashed. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth, and they lost everything. My silence had ended. The game had begun. I smiled. I acted broken, but I was recording everything. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence of their treachery. I started small, subtly manipulating conversations, guiding them towards topics that exposed their lies. I turned my phone into a weapon. Every call, every meeting, every chance encounter was meticulously documented. I invested in high-end audio recorders, hiding them in plain sight, capturing their every word. My apartment transformed into a surveillance hub, a web of technology designed to expose their secrets. It was risky. One wrong move, one slip-up, and my entire plan would crumble. There were close calls. Vivian almost discovered one of my hidden cameras during a spontaneous visit. I had to think fast, pretending I was having a virtual therapy session. She bought it, thankfully, but the incident left me shaken. It was a stark reminder of the stakes involved. I was playing a dangerous game, and the consequences of failure were dire. I began to learn the law, specifically the laws of financial crimes and fraud. I devoured legal texts, consulted with anonymous online experts, and pieced together the intricate details of Mark's shady business dealings. The deeper I dug, the more I discovered. He wasn't just a con artist. He was involved in something far more sinister, a network of illegal activities that stretched across state lines. Isabella was complicit, using her charm and social connections to facilitate his schemes. They were a team, a Bonnie and Clyde for the modern age, and I was determined to bring them down. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally, someone I could trust, someone with the skills and resources to help me expose them. I thought of Dr. Evans, my former boss. She was intelligent, compassionate, and fiercely loyal. I reached out to her, cautiously explaining my situation, careful not to reveal too much too soon. She listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "Scarlett," she said, her voice firm, "I believe you, and I'm here to help." With Dr. Evans' help, I began building my case. She introduced me to a former forensic accountant, a wizened old man named Mr. Abernathy, who specialized in uncovering financial crimes. He was skeptical at first, but after reviewing my evidence, he became convinced. "This is a house of cards," he said, his eyes gleaming, "and we're about to blow it down." Mr. Abernathy helped me trace the flow of money, uncovering a complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The evidence was overwhelming, a damning indictment of Mark and Isabella's criminal activities. I also enlisted the help of a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Harding, who specialized in surveillance and information gathering. She helped me track their movements, uncover their hidden assets, and identify their accomplices. The pieces were falling into place. The plan was risky, audacious, and potentially dangerous, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to bring them to justice. The anticipation was building. I could feel the moment of truth drawing near. I knew that when the time came, I had to be ready. There would be no turning back. My biggest advantage? They believed I was still broken. They thought I was defeated, wallowing in self-pity. While they celebrated their perceived victory, I was meticulously laying the groundwork for their downfall. I used their underestimation against them. Vivian, feeling a sense of guilt, or perhaps a twisted sense of sisterly concern, started making attempts to reconcile. I played along, meeting her for lunch, engaging in superficial conversations, all while subtly extracting information. She unknowingly provided crucial details about Mark's business dealings, revealing meeting locations, code names, and key players in his network. I acted the part of the wounded sister, seeking comfort and validation, while secretly recording every word. It was a masterful performance, and they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. They became complacent, confident that I posed no threat. They let their guard down, revealing more and more with each passing day. I became a sponge, absorbing their secrets, storing them away for future use. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. I started receiving anonymous calls, threatening messages, subtle reminders that I was being watched. Someone knew what I was up to, and they wanted me to stop. But I refused to be intimidated. I doubled down on my efforts, taking extra precautions to protect myself and my allies. I installed security cameras in my apartment, changed my phone number, and varied my routine. I even started carrying a concealed weapon, just in case. It was a necessary precaution in a world where betrayal and deceit were the norm. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. Their biggest weakness wasn't their greed or even their arrogance. It was their insatiable need for control. They needed to be the puppet masters, pulling the strings, orchestrating every event to their advantage. And that's exactly what I gave them, a stage, perfectly set for their final act. I discovered a hidden server tucked away in Mark's office during one of my carefully orchestrated reconciliation visits. Vivian, bless her naive heart, had left me alone for a few minutes to fetch some tea. That's all the time I needed. The server was password protected, of course, but I had anticipated that. Miss Harding, the private investigator, had equipped me with a miniature hacking device disguised as a USB drive. It bypassed the security protocols in seconds. Inside, I found a treasure trove of information: financial records, encrypted communications, and a detailed ledger of their illegal activities. But the real gold was a series of video files documenting their crimes in excruciating detail. There was Mark, negotiating deals with shady characters, laundering money through offshore accounts, even intimidating witnesses. And there was Isabella, using her social influence to manipulate politicians and grease the wheels of their corrupt enterprise. The evidence was damning, irrefutable, and more than enough to bring their entire empire crashing down. I copied everything onto a secure external hard drive, knowing that this was the key to their destruction. But I didn't want to simply hand it over to the authorities. I wanted to make them suffer, to experience the same fear and desperation that they had inflicted upon me. I wanted them to know that I was the one who had pulled the trigger, the one who had orchestrated their downfall. So I devised a plan, a final, elaborate trap that would expose them to the world. I created an anonymous website, a digital repository for all the evidence I had gathered. I called it the Veritas Files, a nod to the Latin word for truth. The website was meticulously designed, with a user-friendly interface and airtight security protocols. I even hired a team of cybersecurity experts to protect it from hackers and government surveillance. Once the website was ready, I sent an anonymous email to Mark and Isabella, informing them of its existence and hinting at the contents. I gave them a deadline, 24 hours to confess their crimes and turn themselves in to the authorities. If they failed to comply, I would release the files to the public. The email was carefully worded, designed to provoke maximum fear and paranoia. I knew they would panic. I knew they would try to find me, to silence me before I could expose them. And that's exactly what I wanted them to do. I set up a series of false leads, misleading clues that would lead them on a wild goose chase. I wanted them to waste their time and resources, to exhaust themselves in a futile attempt to regain control. I knew they were watching me, monitoring my phone calls, tracking my movements. So I made sure to feed them a steady diet of misinformation, planting false stories and exaggerating my fears. I wanted them to think I was on the verge of cracking, that I was about to abandon my plan and disappear. It was a dangerous game, but I was confident that I could outsmart them. I knew their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their deepest fears, and I was prepared to exploit them to the fullest extent. The 24-hour deadline was fast approaching. The tension was palpable. I could feel the weight of their desperation, their frantic attempts to regain control. I knew they were closing in, that they were getting closer to discovering my true location. But I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I had anticipated their every move, planned for every contingency. I was the puppet master now, and they were dancing to my tune. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth, and they lost everything. But not yet. The clock is ticking. I received a call from Vivian. It was late, almost midnight. Her voice was strained, barely a whisper. "Scarlett, please, you have to stop this," she pleaded. "Mark and Isabella they're not thinking straight. They're scared, desperate. They're going to do something terrible." I remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. I felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of compassion for my sister, but it was fleeting. They had made their choices. They had crossed the line, and now they had to pay the price. "It's too late, Vivian," I said, my voice cold. "This has to end. The truth has to come out." "But at what cost, Scarlett?" she cried. "What about our family? What about me?" "You should have thought about that before you betrayed me," I replied, "before you helped them try to destroy my life." I hung up the phone, severing the last thread of connection between us. I knew that this was the end of our relationship, the final act in our tragic family drama. But I couldn't allow sentimentality to cloud my judgment. I had a mission to complete, a promise to fulfill, and nothing was going to stop me. Moments later, I heard a noise outside my cabin. A car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I peered through the window, my heart pounding in my chest. It was Mark and Isabella. They had found me. They emerged from the vehicle, their faces brim, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Mark was holding a gun. Isabella was carrying a briefcase. I knew what was in the briefcase. Money, a bribe, a last-ditch attempt to buy my silence. They approached the cabin cautiously, their footsteps crunching on the snow-covered ground. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. This was it. The moment of truth. The final showdown. The exact day they tried to end me.
The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. Mark shouted, his voice cracking. "Scarlett, we can fix this. Name your price." Isabella stepped forward, briefcase extended. "Think of your future. This can all disappear." I laughed, a hollow, broken sound that echoed in the crisp night air. "My future? You took that from me. You tried to silence me permanently. There is no price high enough." I pressed a button on my phone. Instantly, the exterior lights of the cabin flickered, then died, plunging us into near darkness. The only illumination came from the moon reflecting off the snow and the faint glow of the phone in my hand. As their eyes adjusted, they saw it, a projector screen I had secretly set up earlier, now displaying the Veritas Files website for the world to see. On that screen, their lives played out in excruciating detail. There was Mark, on camera, arranging illegal deals, his face contorted with greed. There was Isabella, using her charm to manipulate politicians, her words dripping with false sincerity. And then the grand finale. Video footage of them plotting my accident, their voices chillingly calm as they discussed how to make me disappear. Mark lunged for me, the gun raised, but I was ready. Miss Harding had taught me well. With a swift movement, I stepped side of him, grabbed his wrist, and twisted, sending the gun flying into the snow. He cried out in pain, clutching his arm. Isabella stood frozen, her face a mask of horror, as she watched her carefully constructed world crumble around her. The website went live. The files were released. The internet exploded. Within minutes, the Veritas Files was trending worldwide. News outlets picked up the story. Social media was flooded with outrage. The carefully crafted image of Mark and Isabella shattered into a million pieces. Their friends, their colleagues, their entire social circle turned against them. The police arrived, sirens wailing, their flashing lights painting the snowy landscape in a dizzying display of red and blue. Mark and Isabella were arrested, their faces pale and defeated. As they were led away in handcuffs, Mark turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and despair. "You haven't won, Scarlett," he spat. "This isn't over." I just smiled. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mark's business empire collapsed, his assets seized by the authorities. Isabella's reputation was ruined, her social connections severed. They faced multiple charges: fraud, conspiracy, and attempted unaliving. Their world, once so bright and promising, was now a desolate wasteland. Vivian, devastated by her siblings' actions, reached out to me again, this time not to plead for their sake, but to apologize for her own complicity. "I was blind, Scarlett," she sobbed. "I wanted to believe the best in them. I didn't want to see the truth." I forgave her. It wasn't easy, but I knew that she had been manipulated, just like I had. She was a victim too, in her own way. The legal proceedings were lengthy and complicated, but the evidence was overwhelming. Mark and Isabella were found guilty on all counts. They were sentenced to many years in prison, their lives forever changed. I watched them being led away, their faces etched with regret and despair. The pain I had carried for so long began to subside. The darkness that had consumed me started to fade. Justice had been served. In the aftermath, I retreated from the spotlight, seeking solace and healing. I reconnected with old friends, pursued new passions, and slowly began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. The scars of betrayal ran deep.
But I was stronger now, more resilient. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. I had learned a valuable lesson that even in the face of unimaginable pain, it is possible to find strength, to find justice, to find peace. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's the universe balancing the scales when they've been tipped too far. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.